way to the mic. They start dimming the lights, you start feeling alright. From Birmingham, home of the Teddy Longs and the Ruben Studders. More once you discover. For all of the lovers of Whitney Houston and Roman Reigns. For all of the lovers of Mickey James and Marvin Gaye. For all of the lovers of Sasha Banks, Janelle Monáe, Silk, Sonic, and Paige. Allow me to say, look, I just found a place, sweet escape, every one of us. I was kinda late, so I just made it off the struggle bus. Walking by the fate, cause I know it's right in front of us. Yo, I ain't with the hate, gotta focus on what's great. Ladies and gentlemen, Steph Hardy is on the air. Had to drop a couple bars just to make you all aware. So, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. You know I go by Joe or the rest of the flow.
Hey y'all, welcome to this new special episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy. So on this episode, I get to have an amazing conversation with the lovely and just multi-talented Southern Honor wrestling commentator Gerard Bonner, and he's also a radio host too. So we get into a lot of music stuff, a lot of radio stuff, and a lot of wrestling stuff, of course. So I hope you enjoy our conversation and chill out and listen to this new episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. So happy for this special guest. He's someone that I actually just connected with and just met like last weekend, maybe a few weekends ago, when it came to SummerSlam and so many different things involving women's wrestling talk. He is a radio host, he is a podcast host, and he is definitely he's also a commentator for Southern Honor Wrestling. This is Gerard Bonner. How are you, Gerard?
I'm great, Stephanie. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, it's Thursday, just getting ready to wind down for the week and everything, but still busy at the same time, but still trying to press on.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And I'm just so happy you were able to join me here on the show. I'm so glad that you're here because you just have a lot of inspiring energy. Like,
well, thank
there's
you.
A lot that you've got going on that I was just like, you know what? I need him on my show now.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot.
Yes, you're welcome. So I'm going to start by asking you the question that I ask everyone once I start my interviews, and that's, when did you fall in love with wrestling?
Oh, wow. I was a kid. I was very, very young. As a matter of fact, I don't know that I remember exactly when, because it seems like wrestling has always been there. My grandfather first introduced me to wrestling, and it just was a thing. Like at that point, wrestling was still syndicated Saturday mornings. And so living in the Northeast, it was WWE. So that was kind of my introduction to pro wrestling as a kid. And I knew I loved it. And then when I started finding out that there was more, I was like, oh, I need to find the rest of this, you know? So, you know, I started discovering the NWA and the AWA and then all these other spaces and just kind of watching wrestling bloom. But yeah, from a kid is when I first fell in love with pro wrestling.
Now, you say in the Northeast, like what part of the Northeast were you from?
So I was born and raised in a space called Monticello, New York, which is about 90 miles northwest of New York City. It's in the Catskill Mountains. And so that worked out really well for WWE, headquartered, of course, in Stamford. But with all of the things that they had going on in New York City, it made WWE the most accessible product to us at the time. Interestingly enough, where I grew up, there was a network called the MSG Network, which was the Madison Square Garden Network. So back then, they would show when they would have a wrestling card in the Garden, which would be almost once a month. At some point, it would end up on MSG. So we'd end up getting to watch that as well, which was just like one of the cool perks of living in that area. So yeah, Northeast would be the state of New York, because people remind me it's not New York City. And no, it's not.
Yeah, shout out to New York. I actually had
Yes.
the privilege of visiting New York City, specifically Brooklyn, in June
Okay.
for Black WrestleFest, and
Yes.
that was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. New York City is an entire vibe all by itself. So yeah,
Yes, it's huge. And
it
even
is.
when you think you can visit like one part, it's way bigger than you think it is.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's just like, whoa.
You can't do it in a day. It's impossible. It is
Yeah, you can't
impossible.
do it in a weekend. Like,
Nope.
I'm gonna have to make multiple visits. I know
Yeah.
this. I know this now.
Absolutely. That's
But
right.
when I was there, it was great and everyone was welcoming and
Yeah.
it was amazing. So I
Yeah.
love the parts of New York I was able to go to. I saw Brooklyn, saw some of the apartments and everything from a lot of
Yeah.
the Spike Lee films.
Ah,
I
yes.
went to Times Square and stuff. I actually walked up to Marcy Avenue where Jay-Z's from.
Yeah.
Like, so I know there's still more, but what I did see, I really loved.
Yeah, yeah. It's for any creative, New York City is the spot. Like, I love to go there just to recharge my creative energies. Hang out in Times Square. For me, I got to walk by Madison Square Garden. Like, it's the holy hush. Like, it is the place. So yeah, New York City it's a vibe all by itself. I love it.
Yeah, I feel like if I went to MSG, I would cry.
Oh, let me
I
tell
would
you,
cry.
it is literally one of those things where you walk up on it and it's like, it's really one of those things. And so you start thinking about the history of it. And so, funny story, I actually got a chance to, and so this is cool. So my honeymoon, we went for a cruise, and then we ended up back in New York City. And in New York City, my wife was kind enough to allow me, I have to say it that way, to let me do a special tour of Madison Square Garden. Trust me when I tell you, you need a VIP tour of Madison Square Garden in your life. They show you like everything. So they still have like the boots from Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan from WrestleMania 1. Like, I'm losing it watching all this. It's crazy. It's crazy. So VIP tour, Madison Square Garden, must do.
Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah.
consider it next time.
Yes.
Like, seriously.
Yeah.
So when did you decide, or when did you start feeling like you could use your voice when it came to wrestling, or even when it came to like your radio career? Like, when did you decide that was what you wanted to do with your life?
So as a kid, I found myself intrigued by radio. We had a station called WSUL in Monticello. It was a small radio station. They did primarily pop music. And I was just always so intrigued. I was so intrigued that in the 6th or 7th grade, I think it was 6th grade, they actually would have the people who would do the announcements on the PA system. And so I was the guy that tried out for that and got it at 6th grade. Now, in middle school, you were only supposed to do that in 7th or 8th, but I'm doing it in 6th. And so it was just, I was always intrigued by the behind the scenes piece, the power of the voice, that type of thing. So I was always involved in things like that. And yeah, as time continued to progress, you know, just realizing what your voice could do, being involved in music and all that type of jazz. But then I ended up getting involved in radio, several years later after college. And that really kind of led to the whole trajectory of, wow, you could really do all of this in terms of what you do with the voice. Now, the funny part is, as a kid, I had wrestling figures and all that type of thing. So I'm making wrestling matches and I'm commentating the wrestling matches as a kid. Like, it's just what you do, right? So I did not know how much that would ultimately help me growing up in this line of work at this point. But yeah, all the way back in 6th grade, I knew I loved using my voice, from announcements to radio and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of how it starts a little bit. Sometimes it really does start for people, you know, when they're really young.
Right.
For me, it didn't start when I was really young.
Okay.
Mine started only 2 years ago, but either way, but somehow or another, I feel like my life has prepared me in a sense, because of course of some of the stuff that I was made to do or taught to do. naturally because my mom wanted me to sound like I had some sense. My
Right.
grandma set me up for speeches at church.
Yes.
So either way, and then of course you have school. So either
Right.
way, you feel like their life sort of prepares you for what you're meant to do in a sense.
It does.
Even when you don't know.
Right. No, I totally agree. Because I didn't know at the time, that I'd be doing radio, that I'd be doing pro wrestling. I didn't know any of that. It was just, I like this. But you're right. Our parents, our forefathers, they tend to set us up in spaces so that we can actually have those things used and we can get accustomed to it. And so then when you step in these spaces, you go, oh yeah, I have done that before. That does transfer over. So yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Definitely. So it seems like you started your radio career very early and then you sort of kept it going, throughout your life. So who would you say sort of inspired you, as you were going through your radio hosting journey? Like, did you have any examples or any, DJs that you heard that you liked, or you picked out any favorites as you were growing?
So it's funny. I talked about WSUL, which was kind of the station there in Monticello. While I was living in Monticello, there was also a station in Poughkeepsie, New York, which was about 60 miles south of that. They had the dope music. Like SUL had, the 80s pop, which has its place, by the way. But I mean, the more urban music showed up on the station out of Poughkeepsie. And then on the good days, when the signal was right, I could actually catch some stations from New York City. So we'd catch WBLS. And by then it was like, whoa, New York radio is a completely different ball of wax. So just hearing how, they would introduce songs, hearing how they would specialize in premiering songs, doing world premieres and all that type of stuff. So that what that did was it really gave me this idea about the power of breaking songs. That's what radio certainly used to do, still does sometimes, but now it's more internet. But radio was primarily for doing that. So that's something that I started taking with me, wherever I was going in terms of radio. Like, okay, how can we use this platform to introduce new artists, independent artists, and the like? So that's kind of really where all that ended up starting for me. And I just kind of ran with it from there.
Okay. So basically, you did take learning from these stations and just sort of take it with you and let it run. Absolutely. Now, I know for me, I loved listening to the radio, and I still do to a certain extent, depending on my mood. Sure. And I know a lot of people, when I first started podcasting, I do pay a lot of attention to the DJs or to the personalities that are on there. Yeah. And I loved everyone like on Hot 107.7. This is here in Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay. Sweet.
That's where I'm from. Yeah. So I love Tasha Simone, and I also loved Kim Moore, who I believe is still on 98.7 Kiss FM. Nice. And I did love Tom Joyner. Of course, he's retired now. Yes, legendary. Had no clue how legendary he was until I got a little bit older. Yeah. But yeah, like he was one of my favorites as well. And Steve Harvey to a certain extent, but then again, you kind of familiar with him just in life period. Right. Before I knew he even had a radio station. And then of course you have the Breakfast Club now. A lot of newer stuff. And Hot 97 and a lot of different radio stations. And I know there's one radio station called The Wave in Los Angeles that I really love too. I listened to that all throughout, the time I was in LA. So I love radio, and I love, picking out people whose voices I become attached to, and how they introduce, songs and stuff like that. So I love radio and the personality. And I sort of just started taking a little bit from what I learned from them, from listening to them all these years. Oh, and Michael Baisden. I love me some Michael Baisden.
He's really good.
He's so good.
So good. Like, oh. I remember I would listen to him at work and the way he would tee up conversations. And it, of course, when you're listening to urban radio likes more music than conversation, unless you get the right topics. You get the right topics, we can listen all day. Baisden was brilliant in getting the right topics, teeing them up, making us interested. Like it was, oh gosh, yeah, I love him. Love him.
Yeah, I miss him so much. Like
Yeah.
me and my mama and then my sister later on would listen to him in the afternoon. We come from school and he would just be so popping, like when it comes to any of the subjects, like, and then it would make us go to talking in the car. And they actually met him at an event at a Hot 107.7 event when he had his own radio show.
Yeah.
Like that was so cool for them. I didn't get a chance because I had stuff to do because I was in high school at the time.
For sure.
But
for sure.
You know, they were so lucky to have met him, and he was like somebody that inspired me too. Yeah. So it's just, I just love all of those people, like when it comes to radio, and even now to a degree. Yeah. But yeah, I totally respect that. So when you mention, wow. I'm just so excited right now. Awesome. So you started, so according to your Instagram, it says that you sort of started your radio career a little bit like around 2004.
Yeah, that's about right.
Professionally?
About right. Yeah. So what happened was okay, so let's backtrack. Let's go back to 1996, 1997. I'm in college, and so I was working with, so remember 96, the internet was kind of starting in terms of being able to have some entertainment on there and that type of thing. So I was involved with a website called gospelflavor.com. The design of this website was pretty much to provide news, entertainment, information, and faith-based music, which did not exist in 1996, 97. So we did that. It was popping. It was really cool. By 2004, some folks in Virginia Beach, which is where I was at the time, they were aware of the station. I met them at a concert, a live recording, and they realized who I was, and they were like, we would love to have you come do a news segment, like a 15-minute entertainment segment on the show. I'm like, great, that'd be awesome. The first day I went to do it, people started calling in. It turned into a 2-hour thing. I was like, wait, how did this happen? I'm only allowed for 15 minutes. So that ultimately turned into me becoming a co-host on the morning show there, and did that for about, probably 3-4 years, and won some awards and things like that. But yeah, that's how the official professional radio career started back in 2004.
Okay, so you started on a gospel website like gospelflavor.com. I have a nerdy question to ask, considering you said that was in the 1990s.
Yes.
I was a young child, and gospel was really the first genre I ever listened to because my parents and my grandparents only wanted me to listen to clean stuff.
Of course.
How was the landscape of gospel, and how did that change, of course, when Kirk Franklin came on the scene? Because that was really the first gospel artist I, was exposed to, as a younger person. Sure. And I know anytime I would hear Stomp, even to this day, I will still dance and just stop everything. Yes. So how was the landscape of gospel music at that point? We're getting a little bit off topic in terms of wrestling, but I don't care. This is my show. So
it is totally.
So how was the landscape of gospel back then when you were on gospelflavor.com, and how did that change when it came to more urban contemporary gospel music?
Yeah, so 96, 97, boy, we could go on a whole clinic here. We start talking about gospel. 96, 97, obviously the massive launch of Kirk Franklin and God's Property, Stomp, all of that jazz. And really the 90s was a major movement for gospel music. It started getting a lot of crossover appeal. They also started to have a lot of mainstream labels pick up gospel divisions, which was kind of unheard of prior to the 90s. So, that really revolutionized what gospel music looked like. And the urban side really began to grow by leaps and bounds. Kirk Franklin was definitely a big part of it. There were a lot of other artists that were a big part, Fred Hammond and a lot of other incredible folks. And it inspired a really neat movement to happen as well. So when gospel flavor came along as the internet portion of that, that really was, again, revolutionary, because the record labels were just like, oh snap, there's an internet outlet that's credible, that's talking about this, let's run with it. You know, so really the space of gospel music during that space, it was major. I mean, think about this. Kirk Franklin and Stomp was being played regularly on MTV.
Wow.
Like, we have to process that, right? That's, even today, you don't hear, you know, regular gospel music of any form being played in these kinds of spaces. So Kirk is being played on MTV, regularly on their countdown. That song got nominated for an R&B award for the Grammys that year. Like, it was bananas, and it really just kind of opened up the realm of what gospel music could do on a mainstream platform. So yeah, it ushered in a lot of new spaces for gospel in the 90s, and progressively so.
Man,
Yeah,
I bet
crazy times.
I bet to be an adult and witness that was just insane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even being, and just watching the evolution of all of it was crazy. And, you know, watching, so it's funny because, and wrestling and music and all these things are so similar, because as industries change, there's always this percentage of people that embraces the change, and another percentage that's like, this is the worst thing ever, right?
Yes.
You know, so that happens in wrestling, and it happens in gospel, and it's still happening in both. And so there was that kind of opposition happening in 97. And so here it is now, where we're looking at, if we're looking at gospel music, Kirk is still like king, and he's still doing amazing. But then you have a hip hop component now that is everywhere, that's doing things that traditional gospel isn't doing. So you now have elements of Christian hip hop on mainstream platforms, on the NBA and NBA 2K, ESPN. There's a song called "Coming in Hot" from Andy Mineo and Lecrae, which went crazy viral on the socials. People using it on Reels and all. Truist, the bank, just picked that up, and they're using that in a commercial now. So it's crazy just to see how all of this is evolving. But like I told you in wrestling, there is still a whole component, like people who hate it and they think it's just the worst thing in the world. And so.
Yeah, and then even in wrestling, Raw's old theme song was actually by a Christian artist.
NF.
And I didn't know that until Josiah Williams, shout out to him, because he actually did the theme song for the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. You know,
he's the man. I love him. Yeah,
he retweeted and said that was a gospel rapper, and I was like, are you serious? Really? Like, that was extreme to me, and that song was fire, you know? So and then before, it was the Raw theme song they used in a vignette for Bianca Belair. And I was just like, this is perfect. But I wasn't ready to find that out. And when I did, I was like, whoa.
It's pretty shocking.
We can talk about that like all day.
For sure.
Yeah, what would you say is the best advice that you got, you know, as you were starting your career as a radio host?
Wow. Best advice. I would simply say it was just being true to myself, you know, because the challenge in those spaces is you see other people doing things and you almost think, well, if that's how they do it, then that's how it should be done. But if it's not authentic to who you are, then you're just becoming a carbon copy of them, and you'll never be successful. So I had to learn to find my voice, which was another important piece of advice that I got. Because it's funny, I remember recording some of the things I did in early days, and then I'll go back on occasion and play it and go, eek, like, that's horrible. But it takes time to find your voice. You know, when you find your voice, become comfortable with your style. And again, it's about being yourself. And so that ended up proving to be helpful for me, because when you're authentically you, there's always going to be an audience that appreciates it.
Definitely. And that's really good advice for anybody in anything, really. Yes. Like not even just in podcasting or in radio, but just in life, period.
Right.
Like,
absolutely.
You know, I believe I just read this quote on a Facebook status from last year. It was Mr. Black from the Jobber Tears podcast. Shout out to them.
Yes.
He said, when you're dope in real life, you'll be dope in everything else. And I was just like, and when I reread that, I was like, dang, that's a bar.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
That is a major bar. And
Yeah.
and that, applies to everything and everybody. So, for those watching, just be true to yourself and,
Absolutely.
there'll be room for that.
Yeah.
So when did you decide to make the transition from radio into wrestling commentary? And was it hard or was it easy?
So the doors for wrestling commentary opened up in 2019. And in terms of whether it was easy or hard, I don't know that it was hard. I'll go so far as to say, well, let me back up. I have to tell you the story of how it happened.
Okay.
Because the how it happened is where, so I've always been trying to figure out how to get into commentary and into the wrestling business, but never really knew how. And, there aren't just like job openings, right? That you can find on Indeed for this. So it's really about, ended up in the right place at the right time. So ironically, I ended up getting for my birthday a 10 Groupon of 10 passes to DDPY, which is Diamond Dallas Page's yoga performance center here in Atlanta. So I went top of 2019, and as I was going, I loved it. It was great. But I started seeing on the wall the sign or the logo for AEW. And I'm like, huh? What is that doing here? Now, this is like the launch of AEW. What is that doing there? So I ended up finding out that DDPY was actually the space where they were shooting vignettes and they were shooting promos for AEW. Crazy. Well, it got crazier because then I found out that they were running a wrestling promotion out of DDPY. The folks that were there were running it was called Southern Honor. So I was like, cool, they're running these shows once a month. And so I finally ended up at a show in September. So in November's show of 2019, I meet the commentators. The problem was one of them didn't show. So I said to the other commentator that was there, I was like, listen, if you ever need any help or whatever, I'd be more than happy. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about me. I'm normally not that guy. I am not the guy to just run up to somebody and say, hey, these are my services. Let me help you. But it was just kind of, what I call 5 seconds of courage, right? You need 5 seconds of courage to make a decision. That's all you need. Once you do it, then you can just grab another 5 seconds from somewhere else. So I went on, I told him that, and I figured he's not paying attention, good convention talk. Oh yeah, sure. I'm like, all right, fine. The next month, I get ready to go to the show. I had a really crazy day that day. Got to the show. 30 minutes before the show, I walk in and the booker is meeting me at the door. And he's like, we've been trying to contact you all day. I was like, wait, what are you talking about? Apparently they had been trying to DM me. I hadn't been on the social, so I didn't know. And this is the next thing he says to me. He says, do you want to call the show tonight? Yeah. So again, 5 seconds of courage. I said, yeah, that fast. And then I thought about it. Like, what did I just say? Like, I'm not even sure what the matches are tonight. Like, how am I going to do this? But I already said yes. I can't back out at this point.
Right.
So I get in, and about 15 minutes before the show, they sit me down at the commentary booth. The owner comes over and he says, hey, if you do a good job tonight, the job is yours. So don't suck. Geesh. No pressure, right?
Right.
And so we get started, and I promise you, it felt like breathing. I couldn't believe just how things were flowing. And after the first match, my fellow commentator, Brandon, I said, so how is it? He's like, oh, we got something. Yeah. And they offered me the job that night. So I say all of that to say, in terms of the transition between the two, I feel like everything prepared me for that. So it was not nearly as hard as I thought it would be, just because I was more prepared than I realized I was. So I had a period where I said, well, maybe I should just stop radio for a bit and fully focus on wrestling. But it didn't exactly happen that way. So I'm actually still doing both, which is pretty cool. But for me, pro wrestling, being able to do this, it is legitimately, of all the things that I do, it is the thing that I think is the easiest for me to do. And that actually scares me.
It scares you.
It scares me because I'm preparing for everything. When I do commentary, I get prepared, all this type of stuff. But I've never had something come this easy to me in terms of my ability to do it. And so that is not a braggadocious statement. It just scares me because I'm used to having to do all of this preparation and then talk myself up. And no, it's just like, let's go. Let's go. So I'm grateful. So in terms of the transition, not a hard transition at all, because I realized, like I was saying earlier, all of these previous things prepared me for this moment.
Yeah. See, for me in commentary, like, it wasn't so easy for me because I hadn't done it before at that point either.
Yeah.
And I had only been doing podcasting and hosting. Gotcha. And I was just like, okay, I don't like, but the opportunity for me came through Miranda Morales, who's out in Arizona. Nice. And she's a podcast host, and she was friends on Facebook with Casey Dillon, who was starting a female wrestling promotion, the Belladonna Division in Gadsden, Alabama, which is about 2 or 3 hours away from me. And I was just like, and she basically, DM'd me the information. I was just like, because she was looking for somebody and nobody else had responded to her. And I was like, maybe I should try, just to see. And so I told Casey who I was, messaged her, gave her all my, credentials at that point. And she said, send me like an episode of your podcast. And I sent her like my trailer, which is only maybe 40 seconds, and then another episode. And she listened to the trailer and she wanted me immediately. And I was just like, what?
Wow.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
And ever since then, I only had a couple weeks to practice, but I practiced and listened to every person I had ever listened to when it came to commentary. Michael Cole, everybody, everybody, and just practiced, as I watched matches that they have on YouTube. Absolutely. And just practice and practice and practice. And then once I got started, it feels easier once I practice. Like, I'm not one of those people that can just do it like off the cuff or offhand. Like, I have to have all my information first. For sure. And then I have to be prepared for it and be, and I'm naturally energized anyway. And I just love to talk anyway. But so that wasn't a problem. It's just for me, I have to have all the information first. And I do color. So it's kind of like, because I'm not really good at play-by-play, but I love color. And so doing that, it was just really fun. Like, it wasn't as easy for me, but at the same time, I do still enjoy it. So I'm still finding my way. Absolutely. I feel like a baby learning how to walk.
No, I get it. And almost like anything, the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. But the studying piece becomes important, because I started paying a lot more attention to, what commentators were doing, what they were saying. And then for me, I just remembered, like, I've been paying attention to commentary for a really long time. That was one of the parts of wrestling that attracted me, was hearing how they would describe things and hearing the humor and hearing, how they connect to pop culture and those types of things. And I was like, that's what I like.
Yeah, that's my favorite part, is connecting pop culture, because I sort of absorb everything. Yes. Like, I absorb everything to an almost scary degree sometimes, but it helps though. It helps does. because when don't nobody know what's going on, you can tell them. So it works. I remember one time I made a Frozen reference while I was commentating. Nice. It was the coolest thing ever. Like, I got to Let It Go like that. Like that just blessed my life. I was just like, yes. Because I love Disney movies. So I was just like, you know what? To use that, it just meant the world to me. I was like, yes, this is my thing.
That is so cool.
I noticed that you have I'm dropping things. So I noticed that you have a really deep love for faith-based music. So is that sort of Is that something that you wanted to pursue? Like, can you sing, or is that something that you just decided that you want to just talk about, in terms of being just a radio host with that?
So it's interesting. Grew up a church kid, like almost all of us, right?
Yeah.
Grew up a church kid, and my mom, actually, music runs kind of deep in my family. My mother was an organist. My grandmother was a piano player. My dad had like the most amazing record collection like you could ever imagine. So music, surrounded me in a lot of ways. And growing up as a kid, I loved music really of all forms. But, much like you were mentioning how our parents wanted us to listen to clean music, my parents inundated me with gospel music. And so that was cool. And obviously I snuck other things in. That's just what we do, and so it's what we do. And I'm wearing a Prince shirt. So,
Yes.
For me, it's funny. I love faith-based music. I love all forms of music as well. But it's just interesting for some really cool reason. I've been given the opportunity to be able to have a voice in the spaces of faith-based music. And so I bring all of who I am to it, so it's not a space where we solely talk about that. I like to really look at its relevance to the rest of the music field. So, I do talk about that on the socials. I talk about a bunch of things. But yeah, over time, I think people have, for whatever reason, come to find me as a trusted voice in that space. Because for me, I want to see people in that space find success. I think it is one of those genres that certainly has a quality message to it, but it's been challenged in terms of how it presents the message and then its relevance in mainstream contexts. So, for me, it's like, okay, well, how do you take something that is that solid and use these other spaces to actually allow people to know it's there? So I try to use things in that regard. Now, fortunately for me, I'm involved in other spaces in terms of music as well. So it does give me opportunity to talk to other folks and connect with other people and things like that. But I think as a church kid, I've always got a soft spot for the faith-based community and wanting to see it find a degree of success.
Definitely. Like, I totally feel that. It's so funny you talked about, sneaking and listening to music. I really didn't do that. Like, it took me a long time to really listen to anything besides sacred music, like a long time. I really didn't get into it until I was watching American Idol.
Oh, wow.
And I know that's real late.
Yeah.
That's how it started. Like, it was really late for me like that. And then that's when I started actually exploring a whole lot more. And when my parents actually started opening up a little bit more to other forms of music, it was like gospel, Disney music, then R&B, then everything else.
Right.
So, it took a while for me to really like open up to other types of music. It took me a while to open up to Prince too, because ironically enough, my dad is the biggest Prince fan.
Wow.
Like, he really is. Like, he has all of his albums in vinyl form, had them in cassette form, had them in CD form. Like, it's like that's his whole, that's almost like a big part of his personality, is the fact that he loves Prince.
That.
I love Prince too, though, because
listening
to him on my own, it was just like, he's just so talented and just so varied in his music.
Yes.
He's so varied. And it's just like, man, like all of this stuff that you were talking about is just so, it's still very relevant even now. Totally. And then just how he opened up doors for multiple people and multiple instrumentalists too, and live bands and everything. Like he was just the consummate artist to me. So
totally. No, I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that.
Yeah, I have a pair of Prince shorts too.
Oh, impressive.
From Walmart.
Hey, listen, we get this stuff where we can find it, so I'm all for it.
It was on sale. I was so glad.
Yeah. So dope.
Your shirt would go perfect with them too. So
excellent.
Yes, I need other Prince shirts though, because I see a lot of Purple Rain shirts.
Yeah,
and I need other albums because I just need other album T-shirts
Yeah.
because Musicology is my favorite one. So,
Oh, okay. Dope.
yeah,
Dope.
very,
Yeah, his
very
catalog
late
is,
discography.
but his catalog is so crazy, and I think we probably didn't appreciate Prince the way we should have. And I think, in his passing, a lot of us kind of started to open our eyes to, oh my gosh, like he was incredible, and even finding out what some of the songs meant afterwards was like, oh, that's what that meant. It's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Absolutely. So, how do you feel about radio having a place during the digital musical age? Because I'm finding, the more we get off into streaming, it's almost like the less people tend to value radio a lot of the time. Like now, like even when you make cars, it's like they put the radio in there, but then they also give you more of the option to like plug in your phone and listen to like streaming services and stuff like that. Yeah. So how do you feel radio still has a place in society, even as we're sort of moving away from it and people sort of question, where, like what the point is of it?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are some stats that proved, and I think this report came out about 2 years ago, that still 95% of people get their information musically and otherwise still from radio, terrestrial radio, which is interesting. So radio itself, I think, has evolved in many spaces. So one of the things I was able to do was I have an internet radio station, and internet radio in itself is one of those spaces that started challenging what terrestrial radio looked like, to the point where now terrestrial radio, if you're a station worth its salt, you have a website and you're streaming digitally, right, because you realize the expansion of your audience in that regard. I think radio will always be relevant as long as they continue to be cognizant of how they get their content to people. That's the way that it goes. So for all that streaming services do, and they do a lot, and for all that social media does, I think that radio has to be connected enough to still provide relevance to people. So they have to still be able to provide news, provide information, provide exclusives that you might not be able to get solely on streaming services. So radio itself, if it stands in a space of being able to inform and tell people, hey, here's what's coming out, here's what you can look forward to, that's a thing. The other thing where radio has a chance to win, where streaming services may not, is radio still provides a space for conversation for consumers. So you can't call up your streaming service and have a conversation about Angela Yee leaving the Breakfast Club, right? You can't do that, but you can do that on your local radio station. You know what I mean? So that's a piece of news in and of itself, right?
Jesus.
And a big piece of news, right? So no. But it's just that, right? Radio has a space, if they use their space well, where they still have a voice in the community, and they still allow, because here's the thing, average people, everyday people love the idea of hearing their voice in mass media. So if you can call a radio station and have your comment play, or you can, call there and win a contest to get tickets to a concert, like that's a big deal. Yeah, that has never died. That excitement has never died. And so I think as long as radio continues to remain relevant in terms of how they present their content to people, we'll always be talking about radio in one form or another.
Yes, it's so funny you brought up winning stuff on the radio. That happened to me last year. I won tickets to the Magic City Classic. That's like the biggest HBCU game here in Alabama that way. And then what else happened? And I've called in successfully on the Breakfast Club at least 10 times.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. Within
the past 2 years. Wow. And I love listening to myself. It's something that used to scare me, but now it's just like anytime I try to do, it's almost like a sport. Depending on what subject they're talking about, I just be like, I'm gonna call in, I'm gonna try. And it's hard to though, because it's so many folks, at a time listening to them all over the country, and I get it. but I still be trying. And when I do get, I be so excited. And they be so nice to you and everything. And they be listening to you, whatever. And it is so cool when you go back and listen to yourself. You know, when they post a clip on YouTube,
right?
It is the coolest thing ever.
Absolutely.
I love it so much.
Awesome.
I wish they could give me a job, but it's okay.
Well, hey, there's an opening, so you know, there's an opening.
I might be too much for them. I don't know.
No, I think they can handle it. They did it with Charlemagne, so you know.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah. But to bring the conversation back to wrestling a bit. Who would you say is your favorite wrestler of all time and why? Or do you have a top 5? And it could be male, female, or non-binary.
This is a fun question. So, Shawn Michaels definitely is very high on my list. Very, very high on my list. Just looking at his complete body of work is really incredible. And after he had that injury, to be out for 5 years and to come back and literally wrestle the best matches of his life. Right. That's like, oh gosh, he is very, very special. So Shawn Michaels, definitely a favorite. I'm a huge fan of AJ Styles. Again, I love a great technical wrestler who can just kind of mix it up and do all the things that he does. He's fantastic. Now it's interesting because I almost compartmentalize certain things when it comes to wrestling in terms of my favorites. So I love them. Lately, I've really been paying attention to the impact of the African-American wrestler in this sport for obvious reasons. And so, you know, I look at, my Lord, I can go all the way back to Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas in terms of what they did in breaking that barrier and winning the tag titles. Obviously, Ron Simmons, for all that he has represented in our business. We have to talk about The Rock. I mean, The Rock is one of one. You know, his ability to come into an industry, to talk, and to then be bigger outside of the wrestling industry than he was inside of the wrestling industry. Ridiculous. Insane. Very. It's crazy. I'm a big fan of Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson. Like, I just love his work. Had a chance to be there for WrestleMania 30 when he won the title. And that was just, that whole moment was a vibe. Like, it was crazy. It's crazy. So those are some of the folks that I like in terms of women's wrestling. Definitely a fan of Bianca Belair and what she has been doing. It has been incredible incredible to watch. I think a name that doesn't get talked about enough is Jazz. I think what she did and what she has meant to the business, not just for African-American wrestling, but for women's wrestling in general. Thinking about what she was doing, man, against Trish and in these WrestleManias and in ECW and all of these places. Like, she's a legend. And then if we're going to talk legends, we have to talk about Miss Jacqueline. I mean, Jacqueline was beating men and beating them handily. You know what I mean? So, like, I love being able to think about the impact of what all of those amazing athletes have done for this business. So, yeah, those are some of my favorites.
That's a pretty solid list of favorites right there. Men and women, definitely. Mm-hmm. Like, I find that asking for top 5s is pretty hard, or at least it's hard for me to answer because it changes. So for me, I can only name like my number ones. So my male favorite is The Rock.
Fair enough.
Because coming up, you know, he was just the guy for me. Like, he was just everything to me and still is to this day. I will never call him Dwayne Johnson. He's The Rock to me. Forever. That's it. Yes. And my female favorite is Sasha Banks. Because I just admire everything about her in terms of how she sort of goes in and just seeks to learn newer ways, you know, to amplify her game, to challenge anybody she's in the ring with. And I feel like she's just never had a bad match against anybody. And it's just like, she's just the greatest women's wrestler ever to me.
I love it.
And I'll fight you. Like, I don't care. Like, I will fight anybody on that. But but nobody has wanted to fight with me about that yet. But I'll fight you over her.
Her catalog is serious. It's serious.
It's so serious. And then for her to be as young as she is,
right?
You know, that inspires me too. It's just like, girl, like, do you know who you are? Do you know what you've done? Like,
right.
It's insane.
It
I
is.
used her match against Bailey at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn in a presentation when I was in college for a communications class.
Yeah.
So it's serious for me. Like, and then I watched her. Special. And then I watched her and Bianca's match for Clear Skin.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just to feel like I can do something, because watching that match, that's like the wind underneath my wings in this business. It just makes me feel like I can do anything now.
Absolutely.
Anything. Like, I love them both so much.
So
what are your hobbies outside of commentary and outside of hosting?
Hobbies. Well, I am a musician, and so I play quite a bit. I love to teach music. I am a math major, which is a shocker to a lot of people, but I'm a math major, and so that means I can. Yeah, it just means I can critically think. So I love being able to do that. I like to exercise. I have some random games that I like to play. I love words. So you can catch me Words with Friends, Wordle. Love that. Like, do that every day. That's just kind of a thing for me. And then I have naturally a wrestling game that I like to play, WWE Champions. And so, yeah, those are kind of the sometimes mindless but fun things that I get to do. Obviously, I'm trying to think, what am I binge watching these days? Geez, it's been a minute since I've done some binge watching. But a good friend of mine put me onto some anime. And so I just started watching that. Oh, gosh, I'm trying to remember the show they put me on. It was something about a classroom. It's on Hulu, and pretty interesting stuff. So,
is it My Hero Academia?
Is that the name of it? It's got to do with a classroom, and they're trying to kill this teacher, but the teacher will never die. And it's really quite intriguing. It sounds violent, but it's not nearly as violent as it sounds. But See, gosh, I gotta find the name of that show now.
See, I can't even tell you exactly what it is, but when you say classroom, I just thought about My Hero Academia. But I really don't watch anime like that. My boyfriend does, so he's a connoisseur of anime.
And it was my introduction to anime. So, like, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm gonna find the name of this though. When I find it, I'll be like,
I understand.
It is called. Oh no, wrong thing. Go ahead. I'm gonna find it.
You're good.
It's anime. Go figure. But yeah, that's one of the new things I've been getting into, and so. But yeah, you'll find me just liking word games and things of that nature. I just like to tease my brain and things like that. So yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So do you feel like you found your groove in commentary with your partner? And when did you realize you found your groove as a commentator?
That's a great question. I think definitely I'm finding the groove. Certainly working with Brandon in Southern Honor is really been amazing. We never really talked about who was going to do what. It just kind of, certain things just kind of fell into place. So it kind of fell into place that he would be doing play-by-play, and it fell into place that I'm doing color. And a lot of that had to do with, I love to tell stories. So I love telling stories. I love talking stats, and really building a case. I guess that's where my math thing comes in, right? So I love building a case for that. So when did I feel like we found our groove? I feel like we found it probably after we came, because we had a break at the start of the pandemic, which was kind of wild because it was like, okay, I just was kind of really getting into things, and like 3-4 months in, now the pandemic hits. But we came back in August of 2020, and we just never stopped. And so I felt like we really started to get our groove by the end of that year, where we really started feeling super solid. Though I think our chemistry was from day one. What's really interesting is as we started doing more things, that's when I think it really got tested for me, because Southern Honor is a product that we knew like the back of our hand. So if it was preparing, it would be preparing if new people were coming in. But then one of our first tests was doing some work with the Nightmare Factory, where we were literally walking in cold. And it was like, these are brand new people who didn't even have names for their moves. And there was no storyline to talk about. And so it's like, what do you do with this? And so that was probably the most nervous I ever was. But that really helped me to figure out, okay, if I can call with no story attached, then I think we'll be okay. So we were filming some things for that. I don't know if that'll ever see the light of day. I'm not sure. But all of those things opened up some doors. So when I got to Battle Slam, I feel even more comfortable working with Suge D. And so again, it's two different kinds of chemistry between Suge and Brandon, but we're able to tell different stories, and I really enjoy that. So for me, it then became a question of, could I do commentary without Brandon? Because Brandon and I have been a team that's been so thick that when Battle Slam showed up, that's when I got nervous, because it was like, okay, will I have this same kind of chemistry with someone else? You know, will we be able to still kind of do, because like with Brandon and I, we don't ever talk about what we're going to do. We just do it, you know? So it was like, can I have that same kind of chemistry with a different broadcast partner? And thankfully, Suge is amazing, and we do. So I think I started to feel like, oh, okay, I think I can really do all of this now, because if I can do it with a different partner, then I take out the excuse that it's only just Brandon, right? And if I do it at Nightmare Factory, where we have no storylines, okay, well then I can take out the excuse that, oh, it's just because I know the product. So now I think I can start feeling confident in any of these spaces that, nah, we can do it if it's a different partner, different product, what have you.
Yeah, like it does feel good when you're able to sort of branch out and do it in other places with other people. Like it made me feel super good when I was actually able to commentate at Battle Club Pro's Welcome to War for Big Swole and for Big Swole and Jordan Blade.
That's
like
dope.
I was brought on as guest commentary like the day before. Shout out to Joaquin Morales. And he just asked me, and I was just like, okay, sure. And because I couldn't say no to him, because I was just like, you know, everybody had been so welcoming to me and everything. And so, you know, I got all the information together, you know, talked to Swole, talked to, you know, Jordan. And once I did everything, you know, it got all the information. I was freaking out because he told me I had an entrance to make, and I was just like, what? Never done an entrance before in my life, but I watched everybody else do it, so I was like, okay, fine. So I did it, and then once I finally sat down and got to commentating, it felt really good. And I feel like now, since I've done it, you know, with Joaquin, and since I've done it in New York, that means I can do anything. So,
Absolutely.
Like, that just made me feel like I could do this. And the fact that I got to commentate for Big Swole, who's just so respected, and someone who I've admired since the Mae Young Classic, like that meant the world to me. I was just like, oh, here we go. This is great. Oh God. It was just
congratulations. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. Still feel like a baby though, but it's okay.
No, but you've had some great experiences. That's really, really good stuff.
Yeah, and I even got to commentate for Jazz as well, like during her farewell tour. Like it was I believe it was like it was a tag team match, and it was no DQ, and it was extreme. And she started grabbing chairs and hitting people, and her tag team partner was the Woad. And I love them so much. Like I've had her on the pod, I've had the Woad on the pod, and just watching them, you know, go at it was just really cool. And there was a point where my commentary bestie had to hand one of them a chair, and everything started moving so fast, and I actually had to commentate by myself. And that was my first time, and I was like, okay, here we go.
Right.
You know, like, you just gotta go ham. by
Yeah, that's
yourself.
awesome. That is so good.
Oh man, it was great. It was fun,
Yeah.
and just the experiences that I have had have been great. And I'm pretty sure you've had great experiences too. You said you commentated for Battle Slam. What was it like commentating for Lil Scrappy?
Yeah. So
what was that like? Because finding out that he was a wrestler surprised me. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What was that like?
You know, it was incredible. It was really, really incredible. I know that's supposed to hit Fight TV one of these days, very, very soon. But you know, even the whole Battle Slam experience was crazy because it was another one of those things that literally just happened. The day before the first Battle Slam, I get a call that says, hey, whoever was supposed to do commentary can't make it. Can you do it? And I was like, sure. I was already planning to go to the show. And so what was interesting was what initially intimidated me was obviously I had a different partner in Shug D that I was working with. But then like the caliber of the folks that were on this card, I mean, you had people from AEW, you had people from Impact, you had people from Ring of Honor. And in my head, I'm like, okay, this is pretty major. Like, you got to crush this, you know, like you have to, you know. And so Battle Slam is a vibe. Like, it is a vibe. You got a live DJ that's there who's literally playing a bunch of music. It's like a big party, you know. And so I think there's a different kind of approach and freedom that you have with Battle Slam, knowing that it's going to be very heavily hip-hop influenced. So for me, it's wanting to make sure that, okay, the things that I'm talking about will really appeal to this specific audience versus something that is of a different population that you think to yourself, okay, what references can I use? So I know I can easily use a ton of musical references over in Battle Slam, which is really dope. So when it got to the little Scrappy piece, man, like, so when he was there to perform the previous month, that was awesome. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, literally I'm sitting there on commentary quiet while he's getting ready to perform. Baron Black interferes. And then all of a sudden there's physical confrontation. And I'm like, wait, what? You know, so even in that moment, it didn't dawn on me that there would ultimately be a match. And so when I heard there was going to be a match, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this is really going to happen. So I found myself very, very grateful. So I'll tell you guys something that I guess most people won't know, but ultimately we'll find out without giving too much away. So he has his match. The match was crazy. I can't wait for you guys to see it. Like, it. Let me say this. I can definitely say this. One of the things that I think is so cool about what's happening with celebrities entering pro wrestling is that they are taking it seriously. Like, it is not just, hey, I'm gonna have a wrestling match and, you know, whatever happens, happens. No, they are taking it seriously. They are training. They're doing. So I was very, very surprised by what Little Scrappy brought to this match. And when you see it, you're going to be like, what? It was really, really good. So there was a match that happened after this. So the match is happening. And then from the back, Little Scrappy comes out and he decides to hop on commentary.
Whoa.
So, yeah. So it's me, Shug, and Little Scrappy on commentary. And I'm standing there like, this is really happening right now. Okay. And then like all these people gathering around us trying to get pictures and videos. And I'm like, this is happening now. And yes, it was a very surreal moment. I can't wait for you guys to see it. But yeah, it's one of those things where you're in it. You're like, don't screw it up. But you're trying to pinch yourself while you're in it. And you're like, yeah. So it's still taking me time to process that actually happened.
That sounds amazing. I love that for you. I can't wait to experience that and watch it. Like, that just sounds amazing. So I want to ask you, I found out who you were through Women's Wrestling Talk, which is something that we both work on together.
Yes. Shout out TK.
Through TK Trinidad.
Yes.
With WWT Live. Now, I'm
Yes.
not on that show, but I do watch it from time to time, anytime I can.
Okay.
So, how did you two link up, and what inspired you to come on for that show?
Sure. So TK and I met probably a year or so ago. We follow each other on the socials. She had asked me she was at that time, she was doing like some Instagram lives on like Thursdays or whatever. And so she'd asked me on occasion to come on and do some stuff with her. And so we did. Earlier this year, she had a panel discussion on the state of Black wrestling in February. And she asked me to be a part of that, along with some other really cool people. And so I was on for that, and we stayed in touch. And then when she had this idea about WWT Live, she, looped me in for it, and along with some other amazing people. And so that's how that happened. And it's amazing. TK is an incredible visionary. I am just super honored to be connected to what she's doing. And for me, it's always a reminder that, you take every opportunity seriously, and you treat it like it's WrestleMania. Like you give your absolute all to it, because to me, everything that we do is an audition for the next thing. You never know who's paying attention. You never know, how that will lead to something else. Our work at Southern Honor led to being able to do some stuff at the Nightmare Factory, and Nightmare Factory led to Battle Slam. And that's just, it's all continuing to connect to each other. So, shout out to TK for, connecting and seeing something to keep bringing me back to stuff. So I appreciate it for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I remember just going out for it because they posted it and was like, we're looking for people and we're looking for hosts. And I was like, should I try this now? Because I'm still, finding my way with my own show. But should I try this now? And I had seen and was watching TK on AfterBuzz television, like before I graduated college, when they would talk about wrestling, and when I couldn't watch it, like that's when I, found out who she was. And I was just like, well, why not? And so I just did. And I'm so glad I did, because I've learned so much from her that I just never thought that I would do. And she allows me to be as creative as I want to be when it comes to hosting, and also when it comes to writing as well. And I feel like I've had like a crash course in journalism as a whole, when it comes to, learning under her. I just feel like she's like my mentor, my teacher, and I just appreciate her so much. Like, seriously, like I do.
She's amazing.
And she really believes in me, and it's just like, oh man, like, thanks.
Yeah, that's the best.
Yes, it is. So how would you say you feel about the state of wrestling now, and what do you think is really good about it, and what could be improved?
Sure. I think we're in a revolutionary space in terms of pro wrestling right now. I have felt this since 2016. 2016, when we started seeing, obviously 2014, we saw the WWE Network. But by 2016, we started seeing, Cody had left. Cody and the Bucks are starting to really do some things. New Japan is now becoming available to us in the States with NJPW World, streaming happening, so that now, you can watch wrestling pretty much anywhere in the world, which is incredible. And then we get to 2019, where, WWE goes on to Fox, which is just insane. AEW starts its own thing. NWA has its own show. It's like the new boom of pro wrestling, And so we had the pandemic era, and now we're in this space where wrestling is really, really booming. So in terms of what I think is really good, I think it's a good thing when there are lots of places for people to work. I never thought it was good for there to only be one main show in town. It's almost like if you had only one genre of music, right? Like the world is so creative that we need many different expressions to be able to get that creativity out. And so that's what I think is great about wrestling, is that there are a lot of places to apply your craft right now. You know, it's not just AEW or WWE. You have tons of amazing indie organizations. You've got, of course, what's happening with Impact and the NWA and so many other spaces. And even Wow being on CBS, like mind blowing, right? You know, so it's all of these things that are happening. I love the fact that Triple H is now head of creative in WWE. And the fact that people are now getting excited about WWE again. It has literally been over 20 years since people have been excited about WWE. That's happening now. That means really, really good things. I love what's happening in New Japan. I love all of this. Things that I think that can be improved. I think it's always going. Let's start here. I think it's always been a challenging space for the African-American wrestler. I think the African-American in pro wrestling is still experiencing a bit of a renaissance. Like, we have more African-American wrestlers, male and female, now than we've ever had in the history of the business, which is a great thing. The challenge with that is, how do we get some of these companies to utilize this talent well? It seemed like certainly there was a period in WWE where, man, this was a great place for African-American wrestlers to be. Then it kind of hit a bit of a lull. I think the jury's going to still be out once now Triple H gets the opportunity to do some things with that. But I think the way that gets fixed in WWE and in AEW is to get people who look like us into those creative rooms. You know, I literally heard an interview today from Jasmine Guy when she was talking about A Different World. She talked about the difference between season 1 and season 2, and she credited the difference between season 1 and season 2 being Debbie Allen coming on board, and Debbie Allen telling the writers, hey, you can't think you just write something and because a black person says it that it makes it authentic to being black. No, you have to go visit an HBCU. You have to go do your research. You have to go and be authentic. So I don't think that these organizations have representation that is authentic, that could reflect how we behave, how we do things, what we say. It's more than just having us rap, right? We are way more than that. So I think having someone that looks like us in the writing room, in the creative room, and then in the executive spaces, I think those things are super important and will help present a more balanced picture of what pro wrestling should look like, because wrestling has always been a microcosm of the larger world. And so if the larger world isn't fully represented in pro wrestling, then we need to fix and adjust some things. And so that would be one of the things that I think we can adjust and fix.
Definitely. I 100% agree with all of that. And not even just in the commentary space. I also feel, and even not even just in the creative space, or even from the athletic point. Right. I also feel like in commentary, there needs to be more diversity as well.
I totally agree.
Because it's just, and also even when it comes to documentaries, I can't tell you how many wrestling documentaries I've seen where they'll interview people who have written articles or people who are hosts and everything. It's like they'll sprinkle some black people in there, but the majority of the people are always vanilla. And it's just like, or they're male. And it's just y'all do know that we also watch this, right? And that we've been watching it for a long time and collecting knowledge on it too. So if we've been collecting knowledge on this, and if we host shows, and if we do all these things and host podcasts and write articles about it, how come you're not asking us to be on Dark Side of the Ring? How come you're not asking us to be on, This Is Awesome or whatever type of documentary you've got going on? Like, put us there. How come you're not putting more women on commentary? How come you don't have more women on your pre-shows? Like, that aren't just moderating the conversation for the men to offer their knowledge. Like
Right.
there needs to be, you know, from a knowledge perspective, from an analytical perspective, there needs to be more people of color, but definitely more Black people as well, because
Mhm.
we are a part of the culture. We move the needle in wrestling just as much as anybody else does.
Yeah.
And we're not just athletes, we're intellectuals. And
Yes.
our intellectual property has value in wrestling just as much as our athletic property does.
I
And that's
totally agree.
something that I want to see more of from my own perspective as well.
Yeah.
Especially as I'm moving through my
Mhm.
own and having my own journey. Because I've tweeted before, like, if I can be a commentator, you know, in a major mainstream promotion, I
Mhm.
want to do that. Like,
Yes.
and if I'm the first Black one, then so
Mhm.
be it.
Mhm.
Like, that's what I want. Like, if I can do that, then I'll be great. And
Yeah.
and more than just us doing backstage stuff too, because I love Kayla Braxton. She's
Yes.
from Alabama, just like me, and
Wow.
she's a Black woman.
Yeah.
And I love everything that she does, but at the same time, we're more than just, you know, backstage interviewers too.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
put us at the table, put me next to Corey Graves so I can, you know, nitpick with him a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, let me do that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about, you know, what TK has done and what a few other people have done in terms of, first of all, bringing those of us who are African American involved in the wrestling industry together, so that we're not silos, so that we know that we are existing and we know what we are doing, and so that we can begin to galvanize and remind and inform people that we are here, that we do have something to say, and that we have incredible opinions and incredible perspectives that add something to the conversation. And that's one of the reasons why, again, I'm excited about Triple H being in this space, because he has opened up so many doors for so many people to be able to walk through and do some pretty cool things. Like, I'm with you. I do think it's kind of tragic that, you know, Renee Paquette was the only female commentator in WWE. And that didn't last long. And they gave her a hard time,
Right.
you know, which I think is terrible. Beth Phoenix was amazing in NXT. She was just fantastic, you know, but I think it's unfortunate that, and we've not had any female commentators in AEW. You know, I think we have to get to this point where we recognize, I'm going to get in trouble. We have to get to the point where we recognize that women are more than eye candy in pro wrestling.
Right.
And I think that women have been limited to only being eye candy for so long that people forget what they bring to the table. And I think it is wrong that women are not given more opportunities at the table to do incredible. I mean, right now we've got a woman as the CEO of WWE. So it seems to make sense that we should have more female voices in more prominent spaces right now, across all desks in WWE, and not just in WWE, but everywhere else. So I think we've got to be able to make room for that. And so, you know, the next thing then becomes us continuing to create content and continuing to put it out there so that they can ultimately find us. And I believe they will. And as they do, I think we'll see some amazing things happen, because I think, quite frankly, we all need to be in those spaces, because I don't know that we're currently represented well.
Right. So, and when it comes to that work, they'll see my work and they'll know where to find me.
There it is.
You know
There
where I'm
it is.
at.
There it is. And that's why we keep putting it out there. We keep doing things. Let me encourage people, and I'm saying this for me and everybody that's watching. You know, sometimes we're afraid to put our stuff out there because we're just, you know, sometimes I don't like promoting myself. I'll tell you that. I hate it. But they're not going to find you unless you put yourself out there. So you have to put yourself out there. You have to get involved with things so that people are aware. And when you put it out there, no matter what the level of resource you have, make it the absolute best quality you can, because you don't want them to be distracted by saying, oh, well, they don't have that. No, you're going to get this work. And I'm going to do the absolute best I can to make sure you get it. And I'm going to do what I got to do to improve the presentation of it. But you're going to get it. And it's going to be undeniable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, what would you say the future holds for you, Gerard?
The future for me, I think, finds me in WWE at the commentary booth. I really do. It is really one of my life goals, and I'm very, very focused on it. I just feel like what I have to offer is something that belongs in those spaces. And so I think it would be incredible to have happen. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm enjoying what I am doing right now in these independent spaces. I think it's amazing. I love that. And I honestly hope that I'll be able to do them both, where I can do WB, because we don't have shows every night. So, it would be kind of cool to be able to do that. But for me, laser focused on being in the commentary booth on Raw, SmackDown, Mania. That is a major focus. Yeah.
Definitely. And I absolutely respect that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm focused on too. But I feel like even though I'm new, I feel like my focus is about like in 10 different places creatively. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It just weirds me out sometimes. It's like I'm hosting, I'm commentating, I'm writing, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, where am I gonna...
But here's the thing, there's space to do it all. And I think you have to give yourself freedom to do that. Like, for instance, being a part of WWE doesn't mean that I'm going to stop doing the other things that I'm going to be doing. No, I can do that too. So it is absolutely possible. And, you never know where the break will come from. So I would say, by all means, do the thing that it is that you're desiring to do. I'm still doing radio. I'm still hosting things. I'm still involved in a lot of other things. But for me, right now, the main goal is definitely getting to WWE in doing commentary. And I'm still going to be doing a bunch of other things as well. But don't let anybody make you feel like you can't focus on a bunch of things. Where much is given, much is required. So, you can get it all done. You absolutely can get it all done.
Yeah, that's what I'm learning right now.
Yeah.
Well, Gerard, thank you so much for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I've learned so much. So would you please tell everybody where they can find you and follow you on your socials, and tell everybody what you've got going on?
Absolutely. You can find me at Bonnerfied on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I am there. You can check me out on commentary for Southern Honor Wrestling. We are on IWTV. Our latest show was about a week or so ago. So that show should pop up on IWTV any day now. So definitely check it out. And you can get a subscription there with 5 days for free if you use the promo code SHW. So go ahead and do that if you're not already part of IWTV. Also doing commentary work for Battle Slam with my man Shug D. And Battle Slam, you can check out all of our stuff on Fight TV. Some big announcements coming about Battle Slam in the next few days, including how you'll be able to check out that match with Lil Scrappy and Baron Black. So that should be amazing. This Sunday, I'll be debuting with a brand new promotion called Championship District Wrestling here out of Atlanta. A guy by the name of the Diamond Sheik just kind of went viral with a video he did with Rick Ross. Yeah, so Diamond Sheik will be a part of this. I don't know if Rick Ross is going to show up, but Championship District Wrestling will be premiering that this Sunday. And if you're not able to make it in Atlanta, I do believe it's going to be streaming on the YouTube channel for Championship District Wrestling. Gosh, what else? Bonnerfied again, check me there. And I usually don't talk about this on the wrestling podcast, but I do have a daily radio show called the Bonnerfied Experience on SoFlo Radio. You can check it out at SoFloRadio.com, or you can check it out on the Alexa app, iHeartRadio, all those spaces. Show airs from 3 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday to Friday. So it's a daily show with all sorts of really, really cool things that are happening there. So all that cool stuff. And you can get merch at ProWrestlingTees.com/Bonnerfied. Brand new shirt there called Bet on You. It's your opportunity to fully invest in your God-given talents and put all your chips on you. So check it out. Pro Wrestling.
Okay, so I was sitting with my friends one day and they asked me, Stephanie, how do you record your podcast? And I said, with the Anchor app on my phone. And they were like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, it's that simple. It is absolutely free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and your computer. And it will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's got everything you need to make a podcast in one place. They even have classes and stuff that you can listen to that will give you all kinds of good tips on what you need to do in order to make the best podcast. So if you want to do this, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm or download the free Anchor app to get started. All right, so I want to thank Gerard Bonner for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. We had such a good time, if you could tell, talking to each other and just vibing out and talking about everything he's interested in, from music to radio to wrestling as a whole. So I'm just really happy to talk to him, and I wish nothing but continued success for him in his career. And of course, please check him out basically everywhere he said you can find him, because he's got a lot of great stuff going on. So, of course, as usual, you can follow me, your girl, Stephanie Hardy, on Instagram and Twitter at Queen Steph Hardy. And, of course, you can find the Hardy Wrestling Podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, as Anchor, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere you get podcasts, you can find it. And of course, I want you to like, share, and subscribe any videos and clips that I post. And also subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Hardy Wrestling Podcast. So if you go on YouTube, search The Hardy Wrestling Podcast, because if you type in just Hardy Wrestling Podcast, you'll get Jeff and you'll get Matt, but you won't get me until like a little bit later. But keep looking until you find the purple logo that has HWP in the middle of a ring, and basically that's me. So please check my stuff out. You can also follow my Facebook page, The Hardy Wrestling Podcast, as well, and just continue to support the show and follow the podcast on Twitter at Hardy WrestlePod, and also follow it on Instagram at Hardy Wrestling Podcast. So this weekend, I might release another episode, because there was a lot of stuff that happened in wrestling that I do want to talk about separate of this episode. So probably by at least Saturday or maybe Sunday, a newer episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast will be out. And then I'll be able to talk about what I liked in wrestling this week and how we're going to navigate these changing waters together. And then also I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I didn't like that I heard about in wrestling this week too. So we're going to get into it all. But until next time, this is the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl, Stephanie Hardy. And of course, the theme song, Steph's theme, was performed by Josiah Williams, aka Mr. Wrestle and Flow. Until next time, bye y'all.